We strongly reject these new tariffs. We believe they are an unfair attack on our workers, especially those in the copper industry. And we are ready to fight back. Ford has said that these tariffs could cost the company $2.5 billion in 2025. In another part of town, experts warn that Stellantis could lose up to 75% of its profits if the tariffs continue. But the biggest surprise is coming from Canada. Canada's Foreign Minister, Mélanie Joly, is now speaking out strongly. She says these U.S. tariffs are a direct attack on Canadian workers. She has marked July 21st as a key deadline. She says if the U.S. does not remove the tariffs, Canada will fight back with power cuts, metal export bans, and a $29.8 billion counterattack. The U.S. and Canada used to be close trading partners. Now they seem more like rivals. The U.S. is throwing tariffs from the White House. And Canada is quietly finding new buyers in places like the UK and Indonesia. Time is running out. If the U.S. changes its mind, car companies like Ford and Stellantis may recover. If not, Canada will strike next, and workers in both countries will be hurt. The U.S. used an old law from 1962 to add these new tariffs. That law was meant to protect the country during the Cold War. Now it's being used to add extra taxes on Canadian steel, aluminum, copper, and even cars. The goal, they say, is to protect national security. But the truth is, Canada is not a threat. In fact, Canada supplies half the metal that keeps U.S. car factories running. And this is not the only case. In early July, the U.S. sent letters to 20 countries. The letters said that if they don't agree to new trade deals, they will face tariffs between 25% and 50% by a certain date. It's like a global countdown. Agree or pay the price. Markets noticed. Foreign investors started pulling their money out of U.S. bonds, causing interest rates to rise and billions to leave New York. Diplomats also noticed. They're now asking, if even Canada is being called a threat, who is safe? Now, when the U.S. says, national security, allies think it's just a threat to get a better deal. With July 21st coming soon, Canada is not planning to back down. Instead, they are asking, has America's favorite trade weapon turned into a danger for itself? On July 11th, the U.S. announced a 35% tariff on all Canadian goods. Canada responded immediately. Within 2 days, Minister Joly met with Canada's top mining companies. She met with Glencore, Teck Resources, and Rio Tinto. She gave them 2 options. Option 1. The U.S. removes the tariffs, and both sides return to talks. Option 2. Canada matches the U.S. tariffs and adds more punishment. Canada's plan is ready. They will add a 25% tariff on U.S. steel. Then they will ban exports of hydropower, aluminum, and softwood lumber to the U.S. Each item is chosen to cause the most impact. Hydropower from Ontario Power's factories in Buffalo and Syracuse. Aluminum from Quebec is used in 1/3 of trucks made in Michigan. Lumber from the West Coast is used in half of the homes built in the Pacific Northwest. Ontario is ready to act first. Premier Doug Ford confirmed on July 12 that the province is ready to add a 25% fee on electricity going to New York, Michigan, and Minnesota. That fee is about $7 Canadian per megawatt hour. This will cost American factories $200,000 to $300,000 per day. That's enough to shut down many of them. Meanwhile, Canadian travelers are already making changes. New data from July 10 shows travel from Canada to the U.S. is down 76% compared to last year. Travel agencies are now sending people to Spain and Croatia instead. Airlines have already removed over 320,000 seats on Canada-US flights for August. Stores near the border, like duty-free shops, report sales are down by almost half. Canada says they are still open to talks, but the warning is clear. They waded through tariffs on aluminum, then steel, then copper. Now the deadline matters more than the words. Only 10 days remain. If the U.S. removes the tariffs, everything can go back to normal. If not, Canada will begin its chain reaction. It will start with power from Ontario, go through Quebec's aluminum plants, and end with tourists choosing Europe instead of Florida. This summer, patience is measured in electricity and airline tickets. Canada's message is simple. The next move belongs to the White House. And the clock is still ticking. Car parts often move many times between the US and Canada before a car is ready. A part might be made in Detroit, heat-treated in Windsor, go back to Dearborn for more work, and return to Ontario to go into an engine. All this happens before the vehicle leaves North America as an F-150 truck. Some parts cross the border 6 or more times before the car is finished. But this process stopped working on July 11, 2025. That day, the White House said it will add a 35% tax on all Canadian imports starting August 1st. That same morning, General Motors stopped a truck assembly line in Mexico. They also warned a Canadian factory in Windsor that it may shut down for 3 weeks. They said the new taxes make it hard to keep things running. This wasn't the first problem. Back in April, the company Stellantis laid off 900 American workers. They also stopped work at their factory in Brampton, Canada. That was when a 25% tax was added earlier this year. Now, managers say the new July tax is even worse. It turns a slowdown into a full stop. Copper prices are also rising fast. They hit a record high of $5.68 per pound. This happened after the US talked about a 50% tax on copper. Copper is important for electric car motors and wiring. Now, suppliers are adding extra fees to every wire and radiator they ship. Canada is fighting back. On July 12, Ontario said it will add a 25% fee on electricity sent to the US if the US doesn't stop the taxes by July 22. This will raise power costs for over 170 factories in New York State. Also, Canada is now sending its aluminum to Europe instead of the US. That means US factories get less supply. And the aluminum prices in the US are already high. The premium price is now 3 times higher than it was in 2021. Car buyers will also feel the cost. Experts say car prices could go up by 25%. That's about $7,000 more for a mid-size SUV. Once current stock is sold, prices may rise fast. Car dealers in Ohio and Texas say people are buying now to avoid paying more in August. Banks also say more people are choosing 7-year car loans to make the payments smaller. The border is seeing fewer trucks and travelers. Truck traffic on the Ambassador Bridge dropped 18% in the past 10 days. Amtrak also cut 2 daily train trips between Toronto and Chicago because fewer people are traveling south. For many years, car companies used tight schedules and fast shipping. Now, every border crossing adds more cost. Taxes and metal prices are going up. Each extra day means another car part stuck at the border. And each delay means car prices may go even higher. But this problem is not just about cars. Other products are also getting more expensive. On June 9, aluminum prices in the US Midwest jumped to over 61 cents per pound. That's 161% higher than in January. Some buyers locked in lower prices early, but the high costs are still spreading. By July 14, steel prices in Chicago were still very high. Hot-rolled steel was selling at $881 per ton. That's about 33% higher than last fall. These rising prices affect many products. Car body parts, fridges, grills, and more. The higher prices are now real and not just a warning. Coca-Cola said they will use more plastic bottles this summer. Aluminum cans are now too expensive. A survey of food companies showed that smaller brands are switching to foil pouches or paper cartons to save money. Builders are also hurt by the rising costs. The National Association of Home Builders said in May and July that taxes on steel, copper, and lumber are adding nearly $11,000 to the price of a new home. Mortgage experts in Ohio say this stops 1 out of every 12 first-time buyers from buying a house. Regular people are feeling the pressure too. A recent report showed that prices are rising fast again. Furniture and outdoor items are leading the price increases. If the August tariffs go into full effect, American families could lose about 0.4% of their real income. That means about $320 less for the average household before New Year's. Canada is also planning a big response. Ontario says it will add a 25% fee to electricity sent to the US starting July 22 if no deal is reached. This would make power more expensive for factories near the Great Lakes. And those costs will soon show up in grocery stores and auto part prices. Tariffs were supposed to protect the economy. But now, the real cost is being paid by shoppers and homeowners far away from the border. Every extra cent added to aluminum, every dollar added to steel, ends up in your shopping cart. The question is no longer if people will notice. The real question is when they will stop spending. Now, trust is the rarest thing in trade. Since President Trump started the new tariffs, Canada has reduced its exports to the US from 78% to 68%. At the same time, Canada's sales to Europe, Australia, and Japan have gone up by 42%. Canada says this shows it doesn't need to depend on the US anymore. And quietly, exporters are making changes. Many are now writing contracts in euros or Chinese yuan instead of US dollars. Trade experts say this helps avoid surprise tariffs in the future. This shift is part of a bigger change. Data from the IMF on July 9 shows that the US dollar now makes up only 57.8% of global currency reserves. That's the lowest in 30 years. At the same time, the euro's share has grown to 20.1%. It's a small crack in the system, but it gets bigger every time there's a new tariff threat. Investors are already getting nervous. In just 4 months, constant tariff news has erased $4 trillion from the US stock market. Many investors are moving their money to gold and European bonds instead. The San Francisco Federal Reserve says the tariffs could cut real household income by 0.4% over the next year. That means people will feel the pain before any factory jobs come back. The US dollar is not collapsing yet, but its strength is slowly slipping. Each new tariff pushes more Canadian goods to Europe and more contracts to be priced in euros. Confidence once easy to find in trade is now disappearing fast. What if every grocery trip felt like a tax hike? In just 6 weeks, a 35% tariff from Washington broke the Canada-US supply chain. It stopped car production, raised aluminum prices by 162% since January, and left businesses unsure about the future. On July 14, the Canadian stock market dropped slightly as investors worried about more tariffs and failed talks. The San Francisco Fed repeated its warning: if the tariffs stay, American families could lose another $320 before the year ends. Will the White House back down before July 21 and restore friendly trade? Or will Canada keep moving forward, making new deals with Europe and China instead? Let me know what you think in the comments.